Okay, so if you are like most people, the moment you hear the phrase Viking afterlife,
Hmm.
there's a single powerful image that just slams into your mind.
Oh, yeah, Valhalla.
Valhalla. You see the golden halls, right?
Ah,
Odin on his throne, these massive drinking horns overflowing with mead,
mm.
and just thousands of dead warriors, the Einherjar feasting, fighting, always getting ready for that final battle, Ragnarok.
It's the cinematic gold standard.
It is. It's what we've all been conditioned to accept from movies, from games, you name it.
And while that image is, it's undeniably compelling, it misses. It misses almost the entire story.
Like almost everything.
So today, for this deep dive, our mission is really to use the sources you've provided to fundamentally dismantle that idea.
The idea that Valhalla was the standard.
The standard, the default, or even, the most common destination for the Norse dead.
That's the key takeaway right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Valhalla was this incredibly exclusive club.
A highly specialized military fate. It was reserved for a tiny, tiny fraction of the overall population.
Right.
Precisely. The Norse cosmological worldview was so much more sophisticated and frankly more pragmatic than we give it credit for. It supported multiple simultaneous afterlives.
Okay, so destinations determined by more than just dying with a sword in your hand.
Far more. It was a complex set of factors. So today we're diving deep into that complexity. We're going to explore the major destinations beyond Odin's Hall. We'll examine what criteria determined where an ordinary person, a farmer, a craftsman, ended up.
And ultimately, I guess, understand why this whole nuanced system suggests a Viking culture that was vastly more layered, more philosophical than the modern stereotype of just, simple death-obsessed raiders.
That's the goal, to get beyond the stereotype.
Okay, let's unpack this complexity then. It makes sense to start with the destination that is familiar to us, Valhalla.
It's the natural starting point.
It is Valhall, the Hall of the Fallen. It's in Asgard, and it belongs to Odin himself. The sources are pretty clear. Getting in was incredibly difficult. It wasn't some universal reward.
No. And it was stringent for a reason. It was functional. Odin wasn't just, gathering souls for a popularity contest.
He was building an army.
He was building an army, the Einherjar. So first and foremost, you absolutely had to die bravely in battle. That was a necessity, not just a preference.
And that alone says so much about the societal focus on martial courage, on honor.
It really does. A straw death, dying in bed of old age or sickness, would immediately disqualify you. No questions asked.
But even meeting that first very high bar wasn't a guarantee. And this is the detail I find most surprising when I look at the sagas, at the Eddas.
What's that?
Even among all of those slain bravely in battle, only half were chosen by Odin.
Only half. And that selection process was rigorous. The Valkyries, these majestic, terrifying figures whose names often translate to things related to war, like Chooser of the Slain, they were Odin's recruitment officers, basically.
So they weren't just selecting all the brave ones.
No, they were selecting the most tactically valuable, the ones who were best suited for the very specific purpose of Valhalla.
That distinction, tactically valuable versus just merely brave, that feels so important. It reminds us that Valhalla was never meant to be a simple, heavenly reward system.
Far from it. The sources really, they hammer this home. Valhalla was a destiny of responsibility.
Perpetual preparation.
Exactly, perpetual preparation. Life there is described as this eternal rotation of intense training.
Right.
Then glorious feasting to restore the energy you lost during that training, and just this constant readiness for Ragnarok. Every single day, the Einherjar would fight, they'd kill each other, and then they'd be resurrected by nightfall to feast all over again.
Honestly, it sounds exhausting.
It does.
It completely reframes the afterlife, not as a place of personal rest or reward, but as the fulfillment of this massive cosmic duty.
That's it. You were literally sacrificing eternal peace to serve as the standing army against the forces of chaos when that final battle arrived.
And this commitment to endless military service, I suppose that's why the selection criteria went deeper than just courage.
Well, some scholars suggest that, they think the Valkyries in Odin looked not just at the final act of death, but at the warrior's hamingja.
Their personal luck or fortune.
Their personal luck, that sort of essence that followed them through life. You needed to be brave, of course, but you also maybe needed to be a proven winner, somebody imbued with the right kind of personal destiny to actually stand a chance against giants and monsters.
So Odin is essentially collecting the best cosmic insurance policy he can possibly find.
That's a great way to put it.
It changes the entire heroic narrative. It stops being about individual glory and becomes about a vital contribution to the ultimate survival of the cosmos.
Exactly. The glory comes from the importance of the duty. But this cosmological necessity immediately brings up the first major challenge to that Odin-centric narrative we all have.
The other half.
The other half. The sources confirm that the remaining 50% of the battle slain did not go to Odin. They went with the powerful goddess Freyja to her realm, Folkvanger.
And this is the critical, so often ignored piece of the puzzle, isn't it? Freyja, the goddess we associate with love, with fertility, war, and especially with Seer the magical arts, she claims half of the most honored dead. And this isn't a secondary claim, is it? It's not like she gets the leftovers.
No, not at all. This is where you see the true power dynamics at play. The sources repeatedly suggest that Freyja gets the first pick of the fallen warriors.
The first pick.
Think about the implications of that. Odin, the Allfather, the god of wisdom and victory, has to wait until Freyja has made her selection for her hall, says Hrumnir.
Which suggests parity, at the very least.
Or perhaps even, a historical tradition that predates the Eddas, where Freyja's claim to the honored dead was actually paramount.
Okay, but as the host here, I feel like I have to challenge that just a little bit. Is it possible the texts only say Freyja gets the first pick to sort of legitimize her claim, without truly suggesting she's on par with Odin? I mean, we know Odin's purpose is singular, preparing for Ragnarok. Is it possible Freyja is selecting warriors for completely different reasons?
That's a really probing question, and it speaks to the complexity of the source material. You're right. Odin needs martial might, just raw combat power.
Right.
But Freyja is connected so deeply to wisdom and magic to Savar. So some interpretations suggest she might not be selecting the physically strongest, but maybe those whose spiritual essence or their affinity for wisdom, maybe even for fate weaving, would benefit her in Folkvanger.
Okay, that makes more sense. So if Valhalla is the ultimate military barracks, what is Folkvanger? The name itself, Field of the People. How is that described in the source material? How does it contrast with the constant noise and battle of Odin's Hall?
The contrast it's stark, and I think it's intentional. While Valhalla emphasizes endless combat and military necessity, Folkvanger and Sisrumnir, Freyja's Great Hall, they're described as welcoming, abundant, and decidedly more peaceful.
So it still represents honor.
Oh, absolutely. Honor achieved through courage. But the ultimate reward seems to be rest, connection, and peace, without that constant shadow of war preparation looming over the dead.
So it's almost like two different philosophical views on what the highest reward for heroism even is.
I think so.
One values eternal service and combat. The other values a well-deserved, honored rest, centered around this powerful goddess who embodies beauty and abundance right alongside battle.
Exactly. And that division shows that even among the highest tier of the Norse dead, the elite warriors, there was variation. There was philosophical choice in their ultimate destiny.
It fundamentally challenges the idea that the Norse were just, monomaniacally obsessed with combat.
It does. They clearly valued peace and comfort and beauty as equally valid rewards for courage. It pushes that whole warrior archetype into a much broader context, acknowledging that service doesn't always have to be defined by perpetual violence.
Okay, so that covers the elite, the battle slain. But what if you were like the vast, vast majority of the Norse population? If you were a farmer, a craftsman, a parent, a child who died peacefully, you didn't qualify for either of those very select destinations. And that brings us to the most universal and probably the most misunderstood destination of all, hell.
This is the critical correction. This is the big conceptual roadblock that I think modern listeners have to overcome. We have to distinguish Norse hell from the Christian concept of hell.
They are not the same place.
They are definitively not the same place. Norse hell is not a fiery pit. It's not a place of moral damnation, and it is absolutely not reserved for the wicked.
It's purely geographical, right? It resides beneath the roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil. It's the domain ruled by the goddess Hel, who is the daughter of Loki, and the giantess Angerboda.
And its inhabitants were, well, they were most of humankind. Hell was the default human afterlife.
The bow.
This is where everyone who died of old age, illness, or just a straw death ended up. We are talking about the vast, silent majority of the Norse population. The artisans, the traders, the women, the children, the elderly.
And the sources go into some detail describing the journey to hell. It wasn't a quick hop across the Bifrost Rainbow Bridge.
No, it was a long, cold journey. The dead had to ride down the road, which was known as Helvegro, or the Hell Road.
Right.
They had to cross the river Gjöll, which was said to be freezing cold, and spanned by a bridge guarded by the giantess Modgudur. The atmosphere of the realm itself is described as quiet and cold and dark. It's surrounded by these high walls, the Nagrinder, the corpse gates.
And we even have these detailed descriptions of the goddess Hel herself, which seem to reinforce that whole atmosphere.
Oh, absolutely. She's a figure that embodies this kind of cold inevitability.
Yeah.
Hell is often depicted as having this striking, morbid duality.
How so?
She's partially beautiful and alive, but also partially decaying, maybe blue or black, reflecting her dual nature as, the daughter of a trickster god and the ruler of the quiet dead.
And she's impartial.
Totally impartial and unyielding. The sources say that once you are claimed by Hel, you do not leave until Ragnarok.
But the key distinction here, and we have to keep coming back to this, is that the realm itself was not cruel.
Not at all.
It was just cold, quiet, and unavoidable. So, if dying of old age didn't send you to some shameful tertiary place, but to the vast realm where most of your ancestors already were, what does that imply about the Norse attitude toward just an ordinary life and an ordinary death?
It implies a deep respect and acceptance. Death was a part of the natural cycle, and a natural death was just a transition to a cold, quiet, but ultimately familiar communal realm.
So the real shame wasn't going to hell.
No. The real shame or the spiritual failing in Norse culture was dying a cowardly death, or maybe even worse, being forgotten. Hell itself was just the communal place you went when the threads of your life ran out naturally.
That's a fundamentally different moral framework than what we typically encounter in modern culture. So if hell wasn't punitive, where did this modern association with fire and damnation even come from?
That is a fascinating process of, well, cultural appropriation and linguistic transformation. Hell only gained its overtly negative punitive associations centuries later.
Because of Christianity.
Because of the overwhelming influence of Christianity as it spread throughout Scandinavia and Northern Europe.
Let's dig into that historical shift. So when the early Christian missionaries arrived, they had two core concepts they needed to convey: eternal reward, heaven, and eternal punishment, hell.
Right.
And they had to translate these abstract moral concepts into terms the local populace would actually understand.
Exactly. And the existing Norse cosmological terms provided the perfect, if completely misleading, linguistic hook. The name hell sounded phonetically familiar to the Old English hell,
And the concept of a Norse underworld.
a cold, subterranean realm of the dead, was the closest analogy they had to their own damnation realm. It was just sitting there, ready to be repurposed.
So they just took the name of the Norse goddess and her neutral domain, and they retroactively applied all of the moral baggage and punitive imagery of the Christian hell to it.
The fire, the brimstone, the everlasting torment, yeah, all of that was just layered on top of the native concept.
And that linguistic and conceptual linkage was incredibly powerful, I'd imagine.
Immensely. Over time, particularly as the sagas and the Eddas were being written down during the Christianization period, this bias sometimes crept into the descriptions themselves, which further demonized the indigenous concept.
So for us, looking back, we have to constantly be peeling back that later interpretive layer to see hell as it truly was.
Which was the neutral, necessary, ancestral home of the majority of the population.
It is such vital context for you, the listener. If we strip away that filter, we see a culture that accepted non-heroic death as normal and completely non-punishable. You lived your life, you died naturally, and you joined your community of ancestors.
And that very acceptance leads us perfectly into the third distinct afterlife path mentioned in your sources.
Right.
One that was reserved for honorable people who are emphatically not warriors.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Helgafell, the holy mountain.
Helgafell, the holy mountain. It's such an important counterpoint. It introduces a clear moral path that sidesteps both the need for violence required for Valhalla and the necessity of the cold ground required for hell. This destination confirms that the Norse system had multiple viable tracks for a respected life.
And it's interesting because while Valhalla and Hell are central to the big Eddic sources, our knowledge of Helgafell comes largely through specific regional traditions,
Like the Icelandic sagas.
particularly those preserved in the Icelandic family sagas, like the Eyrbyggja saga. And that suggests its importance might have been, localized to certain families or geographical areas.
Okay, so let's focus on those specific source details. What were the criteria for getting into Helgafell?
The criteria were purely social and moral. It was a reward for living a good, kind, and highly respectable life. This afterlife was all about reputation and community honor.
So you didn't need to wield a sword.
No, you needed social virtue. The sagas describe the dead who were traveling toward Helgafjell as walking fully clothed, which suggests it was a continuation of their earthly life, but just, without its hardships.
This introduces a fascinating moral balance. If Viking culture was so focused on external raiding and violence, how did the sources balance that violent external life of a Norse leader with the internal need for a good reputation that was required for Helgafell?
That's a key question, and it really goes to the heart of Norse ethics. The violence was often external, right? It was directed toward foreign lands or enemies.
Okay.
But within the local community, the highest virtues were often things like honesty, kinship, generosity, and maintaining your honor through respect and oaths.
So Helgafell rewarded the successful, ethical, and respected leader or farmer.
Exactly. The one who maintained order and kindness within their own community, regardless of what they might have done elsewhere.
It's the reward for the successful patriarch or matriarch, not necessarily the successful raider. And the experience itself also sounds pretty idyllic.
It's described as a peaceful mountaintop world. The reward was the ability to live on with your family and ancestors, a bright, warm continuation of your normal, respected life.
And critically, there's an absence of divine selection here.
No gods involved, no Valkyries, no Odin.
It's the anti-Valhalla in a way.
In essence, yeah. No conflict, no cosmic duty, just a localized, community-focused, gentle reward for social virtue.
And this concept might have taken on even more importance later on, like we discussed with hell.
Precisely. As Christianity introduced a concept of a warm, celestial heaven, the native concept of Helgafell, this ascent to a brighter, peaceful realm, may have gained prominence in later Icelandic tradition.
As a native alternative.
A native, prestigious alternative to the cold inevitability of hell. It offered a noble, non-martial, non-Christian path to eternal blessedness.
So already we have 4 distinct paths. Valhalla for duty and combat.
Folkvanger for rest and honor.
Hell, the default ancestral cold realm.
And Helgafell for peace and reputation.
But the sources emphasize that the complexity doesn't stop there. The Norse afterlife wasn't rigid. It was a tapestry woven from just endless local variations.
We really move now past any idea of fixed dogma and into the realm of a lived belief system. The cosmology wasn't universal. It shifted based on location, profession, family tradition, and even just the specific manner of your death.
Okay, let's talk about the afterlives that were dictated purely by your environment or your profession. The sea is the perfect example. A sailor lost to the waves didn't necessarily end up in the cold of hell.
No, the sea claimed them. Those lost to the waves were believed to join the underwater halls of the sea deities.
Specifically, the giantess Ran.
And her husband, the sea god Iger. Ran was said to have this giant net that she used to just scoop up drowning sailors, taking them to her beautiful yet cold submarine hall.
That makes profound sense for a maritime culture.
It does.
The environment that governed their entire lives, this dangerous, powerful sea, also determined their eternal residence. The physical world was integrated directly into the cosmological structure.
And that concept of integration is also evident in the spiritual significance of the physical gravesite itself.
Right.
Which is maybe the most locally immediate form of afterlife you can have. We're talking about ship burials and these great mound burials or burrows.
The sources show that for some of the powerful dead, the grave was intended to be their permanent, symbolic afterlife home. The ship or the mound wasn't just a container for the body, it was the actual seat of the ancestor spirit.
Absolutely. When a powerful Viking leader was interred in a great barrow, and we've seen this in the Osenberg or Gokstad ship burials, often lavishly stocked with wealth, weapons, even sacrifices, the belief was that he wasn't traveling far to some mythical cosmic realm.
He was staying right there.
He was becoming a localized, potent ancestor spirit, known as a draugr, residing in the mound.
Wait, I thought Draugr were just, well, zombies or vengeful ghosts in later folklore. Are you saying the original concept of the Draugr was actually a powerful, maybe even protective ancestral spirit?
That's another one of those points where modern interpretation has kind of corrupted the original concept. The word draugr simply means dweller, often the inhabitant of the grave mounds.
Okay.
Now, they could become malevolent if they were disrespected or if the burial wasn't done properly, often rising up to torment their neighbors.
Right.
But their primary function was to retain power, to protect the community's land, and to keep their wealth close. They were these powerful physical manifestations of the dead's continued presence.
That must have had profound implications for the living if your powerful ancestor is literally residing in that hill right outside your settlement.
Yeah.
You treat that hill and the spirit within with immense reverence. It changes the relationship between the living and the dead from distant and separate to immediate and intertwined.
It grounds the afterlife in the physical, visible landscape. It meant that the dead retained a powerful, protective, and yes, sometimes dangerous presence right in their community. It reinforces the centrality of family, of lineage, and the immediate land in Norse society. It's a very practical, if unsettling, form of eternal life.
Okay, so this incredible multiplicity of beliefs. You've got cosmic warriors, peaceful mountain dwellers, cold ancestral halls, sea spirits, and these localized burrow dwellers, all existing simultaneously. It raises the biggest and most difficult question.
What decided?
What precisely decided an individual's destination? If there was no single central authority issuing dogma, how did a Norse person navigate all these different fates?
The sources confirm there was no single rigid set of universal rules, but there were distinct, overlapping themes that guided destiny. It required a combination of circumstance and character.
So you can synthesize the determining factors.
We can try. We can break it down into about 4 main categories, I think.
Okay, we've established the first two pretty clearly. The external circumstances of your cause of death battle versus age or illness. That was the primary immediate filter.
Yes, that determined the pool you were drawn from. And then the second major factor was godly selection,
The Valkyries.
specifically the involvement of the Valkyries acting for Odin or Freyja. If you died in battle, your destiny was immediately subject to divine negotiation, to choice, and cosmic necessity.
But the other pathways depended entirely on human and social metrics, didn't they? If you were destined for Helgafell, that was based entirely on your personal honor and your reputation within the community.
And that's the critical sociological factor. It's your earthly legacy. How did your neighbors, your family, your contemporaries view your character? Did you uphold your oaths? Were you kind? Were you generous?
So your earthly reputation could actually dictate your non-martial heavenly ascent.
Exactly, which shows the immense power of community judgment, maybe even over divine decree in certain aspects of the afterlife.
And then finally, we have local customs and family-specific beliefs.
Right, which accounts for the variation of the sea-destined or the belief in the barrow dwellers and other protective ancestor spirits.
So when you synthesize all these factors, the true nature of the Norse religious perspective starts to come into focus.
It does. They weren't focused on a universal judgment managed by a single celestial judge. Their focus was profoundly pragmatic and local. It was centered on legacy, community, and courage.
It's a system designed to encourage specific behaviors that supported the structure of Norse life.
Absolutely.
Courage in battle serves Odin in the fight at Ragnarok. Maintaining a good reputation serves the stability and ethics of the local community. And ensuring a proper burial preserves the lineage and land protection.
It's highly practical. If you lived an honorable, good life, you got a peaceful continuation on the Holy Mountain. If you died violently serving the ultimate defense, you got eternal training in Valhalla. And if you died naturally, you joined the ancestral majority in hell. There was a place for everyone, and it was inextricably tied to the circumstances of their death and the quality of their life.
Which brings us to the final and I think most crucial section of our deep dive. Why does all this complexity, the 4 primary destinations, the local variations, the overlapping criteria, why does this matter to us today? Why should you, the listener, care about the minute distinctions between Folkvanger and Helgafell?
It matters because understanding the full picture fundamentally changes the entire tone of Viking culture. When modern media simplifies the Viking ethos down to that singular dramatic goal of fight, die, go to Valhalla, it reduces them to a one-dimensional, death-obsessed warrior cult. And that is a profound historical and cultural disservice.
The sources reveal a world that deeply valued everyday people just as much as its heroes. The sheer prominence of hell as the non-punitive default destination for farmers and artisans that demonstrates that a life lived outside the battlefield was still a respectable life, culminating in a respected afterlife.
And look at Folkvanger and Helgafell. They prove that Norse society saw beauty, honor, and continuation in peace, not only in war.
There was an honored, prestigious path that ended in quiet rest.
In community, in family continuation, rather than just the eternal grind of martial training.
It seems like their theology had this extraordinary degree of built-in philosophical flexibility, the willingness of the Norse to maintain such diverse beliefs, to accept that the dead lived on in multiple ways at once.
In hell on the mountain, as ancestor spirits in the sea.
That is perhaps the most profound insight into their worldview.
It shows us a society that accepted multiple truths at once. Their religion was not monolithic, it wasn't dogmatic, it was adaptable, It was reflective of local traditions, personal histories, and the immediate needs of their environment. This is the absolute antithesis of a simplified, universal judgment system,
So instead of being a simple warrior religion, the Norse afterlife was this sprawling, complex tapestry of localized and cosmic beliefs.
reflecting a decentralized, diverse, and surprisingly nuanced society.
And that complexity makes them infinitely more interesting, more human than the two-dimensional stereotype we usually encounter.
We move past the simplified Hollywood version to engage with a truly rich cosmological framework that required the living to make highly complex moral and practical decisions about their lives and about their deaths.
This has been a truly comprehensive journey into the multiple realms of the Norse dead. It really demands that you, the listener, rethink every single movie or TV show portrayal you've ever seen of the Viking world.
Absolutely. The next time you encounter that image of Valhalla, remember that you are only looking at one small, very specialized facet of a massive, multifaceted set of beliefs.
Right.
You are only seeing Odin's specific military recruitment strategy, not the entire scope of the Norse destiny.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over as you conclude this deep dive. If a society like the Norse accepts multiple simultaneous afterlives, some based purely on heroic action, others based on your geographical location like the sea or the barrow, and still others based on your moral reputation among your immediate peers, how does that fundamental belief system shape their approach to morality and daily decision-making?
Think about the practical pressure that puts on an individual. The Norse had to navigate a world where destiny was simultaneously determined by the courage of their death, the kindness of their life, and the specifics of their local environment. How would that complexity alter their approach to ethics, compared to a culture that's operating under a single, highly structured reward or punishment system based on universal rules?
It requires a different kind of moral pragmatism entirely.
It really does. Something to contemplate as you
Yes.
consider your own legacy.